Okay, I will have more for you tonight on our military and those medals. This all stems from the Brereton report into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. A couple of years ago, Defence Force Chief Angus Campbell wanted to implement its recommendations to strip unit citations from 3,000 soldiers. That was thwarted by Peter Dutton, who was then the Defence Minister. But now General Campbell is targeting a couple of dozen soldiers who were in command roles in Afghanistan, recommending that their honours be returned. Remember, only one person has been charged with a war crime in Afghanistan and no one has been convicted. But as I showed you the other night, the Defence Force Chief himself received a Distinguished Service Cross for his time leading the Middle East operations, including Afghanistan, in 2011. So don't you think there might be consideration about whether or not he should keep this medal? Well, it was considered apparently. Who by? Well, by General Campbell himself, of course. Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest?
I could see the perception of the conflict of interest, but having read the complete Brereton report, I felt that this could be done by me and it could then be considered comprehensively by the Deputy Prime Minister.
Dear. This is surely a problem for General Campbell. He's being criticised widely. Some people are calling for his head. But given what he's been doing and saying, surely his own Distinguished Service Cross might have to be stripped.
To be fair, it would have to be considered. There were failures in the command chain at various levels.
I'll have more from Neil James later in the program. And tomorrow, by the way, we'll get the verdict in the Ben Roberts-Smith defamation trial about Afghanistan allegations. So there's lots more to come on this front. Let's now go. Let's go now to my next guest, who's One Nation leader and founder Pauline Hanson. She joins me from Queensland. Good to talk to you, Pauline.
Thanks, Chris.
Tell me what your thoughts about General Angus Campbell and trying to get these citations and medals from soldiers serving and veterans.
I'm not happy about it. And I've actually spoken to some veterans with regards to it, and they're not happy about it at all. The Brereton report, it was just questions asked by a panel of people. There was no representation. They had no representation. It was not before a court procedure or anything like that. And I think the way it was handled was disgusting by the government at the time. And to strip these soldiers of their medals, or they were going to at the time, but Peter Dutton stopped it. And if it's been considered again now, as you said, only one soldier has been charged, has not been convicted. And, you know, Chris, I went over to Afghanistan on the parliamentary delegation. Now, I met a lot of the soldiers over there, proud to be serving their country. But over the years, I've actually dealt with a lot of soldiers that have been just flicked to one side after they're out of the service because of the health reasons, whatever. They haven't been looked after. They're fed up with the armed services. They're fed up with people that are in the higher ranks that they feel that they just don't know what they're doing. And that's why they're losing a lot of the personnel are walking away from the armed services, because it's not the Army or the Navy or the Air Force that it used to be years ago.
Yeah, look, the counter-argument to this that we're going to hear later in the program as well is that the Defence Forces have done their own investigations and they have concerns about what occurred, and therefore the soldiers or officers that are in charge of those operations are effectively suffering or facing internal discipline and should hand back some of these citations and the like. Does that wash with you, or should we wait for criminal outcomes?
I think you should wait for a criminal outcome. It's guilty, you're guilty until you're proven innocent, and they've got to prove their innocence. I think it's wrong. This is what's changing in our legislation. I see it in legislation passed by this government, that you actually are guilty and you've got to prove your innocence in some of the legislation we just recently passed. So I think our whole society's changing. No, I don't. Don't take the medals off them until there's any, real proof that they didn't do their job properly, or their behaviour, or for whatever reason. Chris, I don't believe that. We've got to start backing our soldiers, backing our defence personnel, and, are some of these people going to lose their medals who shouldn't lose their medals? You know, I think it needs to be out in the open too, and I think the public should know everything.
Now, I've got to ask you about another topic that was raised today. That we talked about how the Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe, was giving evidence to Senate Estimates Committees. There was interesting questioning when it comes to migration, population growth in this country, and, of course, the conflict with the housing crisis that we've talked about before. Have a look at Philip Lowe.
The population's increasing by 2% this year. Are there 2% more houses? No, hardly. You know, the rate of addition to the housing stock is very low. So I've got a lot of people coming into the country.
A lot of people
wanting to live alone or kind of not move out of home, and it just doesn't. It doesn't work.
It's pretty simple maths, isn't it, Pauline? If we've got this population growth, how are we going to supply the housing?
We can't supply the housing. The government said they're going to have this fund and build 30,000 homes over the next 5 years. Chris, they can't do it. We don't have the tradies. We don't have the materials. They will not be able to do it. You know, blank no. So bringing out another 715,000 people over the next 2 years, this year and next year as well, plus the 7,000 we brought in a week since they've been in government for the past year, we can't cope with it. I put out a plan today because no one's got an answers to it. I've actually put out a policy that people who are home owners should be able to rent out a room in their home tax-free. Meaning they don't have to declare it or pay tax on it. Until we get rid of and deal with the homeless people that are on our streets, give them a roof over their head, it will help people pay their mortgages, the escalating costs, if the government was to give them a tax relief if they rent out a room. I think it will help everyone. I think it's a win-win situation.
Well, I think we've got to talk about this. People were mocking Philip Lowe talking about this today, but we do have enormous numbers of houses where there's just one person or two people living in big houses. It's been a trend in society over many, many years. So we've got to talk about making better use of the existing real estate stock.
Chris, you can't dictate to people what size house they have and how many bedrooms they use. They work for it, they bought it, that's their house. But if they want to rent out a room and get a bit of income to pay for the escalating costs, especially electricity that's gone up under the governments, that hasn't gone down, and that's adding, you know, cost of living to everyone right across the board. I think it's ridiculous what they're doing. And another thing, Chris, is to get rid of foreign investment in our housing. We cannot allow foreign investment anymore. Those people who are foreign investors in this country that have bought up established housing or any housing, they should be made to sell it within the 12 months. Get rid of it.
Some of it is sitting there empty, we know. We need to get numbers on that. We do need some of it sitting there empty, which is a tragic waste. Thanks for joining us, Pauline. Appreciate it.